Cooking dinner for my family most nights of the week with real nourishing food is a huge priority of mine. And I wanted to invite you guys in and share some of the meals that have been go-tos for us for dinner recently that we have really been enjoying. I'll be honest, at the end of every day, I'm just feeling kind of worn out and I don't really want to cook. I'm not really super excited about cooking dinner, but it is something that's important to me. And I find that once I just kind of get going and start, it's fine. It's totally fine. It's not necessarily the chore that it feels like it will be when I am starting to, go down to the kitchen and starting to cook. The first meal that I am making is tacos. We love tacos in this household. It's probably my family's favorite meal. I know it's my oldest. Every night, no matter whether we had tacos the night before, she's like, "Are you cooking tacos?" She loves some tacos. We all do. But this time I'm making some Barbacoa beef tacos, which feels like such a treat. Typically I make just ground beef tacos, which is super easy, or I'll throw some like chicken breasts with taco seasoning and salsa in my Instant Pot or crock pot, whatever I get around to. And that will just be like super easy shredded chicken tacos. But we have been having these maybe like once a month. I'll make these because it's definitely more work than just like the quick ground beef or shredded chicken option. But my goodness, they are so delicious. I'll leave the recipe down below that I found that I follow. I follow this pretty much to a T, and maybe with a few substitutions, but it's so delicious. The beef comes out so tender and my kids love it. We all just really love it. And I love that it's Instant Pot because it's just a little bit easier. It's just easier to throw in. It takes less time. So I got the beef cooking and then I always make tortillas. So this is the part where you might be like, I am not making homemade tortillas. But let me tell you, it is obviously more work than just pulling tortillas out of a plastic bag you bought from the store. But the taste difference is you just can't. It's almost like it's two different foods. Like the tortillas, especially the highly processed tortillas you're going to buy at the store that have like a million ingredients, they have no taste. They taste like paper to me. Their texture is just kind of weird and chewy. They're just not good. And once you start making tortillas, I'll warn you that you'll like never be able to go back. There are some, like store-bought ones you can buy that have like very few ingredients. Usually they're frozen, and those are definitely a step up, but absolutely nothing beats fresh, warm, homemade tortillas. I'm pretty sure this is 100% why my kids love this meal so much. They're always trying to sneak some tortillas off of from the little towel while I'm cooking them before dinner starts. And they really are not that hard. You just throw the dough together. I just do all-purpose flour and a little bit of avocado oil. I'll leave the exact measurements down below. A little bit of salt and a little bit of water. I think that's what it is. Again, I'll put it down below. But I make them the same way every time. I do use all-purpose flour because they're just the best with white flour. And you just mix the dough all together. You knead it for a couple minutes, and then you just roll them out, throw them on the skillet until they kind of bubble up and get nice and brown and toasty, and that's it. It's really easy. You always want to store them wrapped in a little towel once they come off the skillet because that keeps the steam trapped in there, which keeps them nice and soft. And then just for topping these tacos, I kept it really simple. We just did some shredded cheese, some red onion, and cilantro. I've also done once like a cilantro lime crema when I was feeling fancy, and it's so good. But really anything you put on top of this really tender, flavorful beef is going to be so good. Next, I am making another favorite. This is another family favorite meal. I probably cook this once a week or once every other week, and it's just always a hit in my house, and that is burger bowls. It's basically like a deconstructed burger, but instead of using a bun, I use rice and potatoes. So the first thing I do is I start roasting the potatoes. I just chop them up, a little avocado oil, salt, pepper, garlic powder, and I roast those at 400 for, 30 minutes or so, just until they look nice and like brown and crispy. And then in my Instant Pot, I'm getting the rice going. And I always typically use white basmati rice because it's my kid's favorite. And then if I have bone broth made, I always use that instead of water because it just bumps up the nutrient composition. Basically, it adds a lot more vitamins and minerals. It also bumps up the protein. And I am all about ways to take very basic foods that my kids happily accept and eat and just try and increase their nutrient value any way I can. So rice is such a great one. Another thing I do is I like to add beef liver powder to ground beef anytime I cook it. You really can't taste it, especially when it's all mixed up with other foods in the meal. They have no idea, but I'm giving them little doses of extremely nutrient dense beef liver, which is awesome, especially because they're too little to take capsules at this point. I always take capsules of beef liver, but that's just another trick I have. It's one of the reasons I love fresh ground flour for a lot of the bread products I make, because it's just higher nutrient value, and it's all foods that my kids like. It's bread and pancakes and things like that. So for the burger bowls, I always make a burger sauce, which the base of it is mayo, and I always make my own mayo. It is incredibly easy. If you have an immersion blender, this is such a great little gadget to have in your kitchen. I find a lot of different ways to use it, especially for mayo or sauces. But I just do a cup of avocado oil, an egg, and then I just eyeball a little bit of salt, lemon juice, Dijon mustard, and white vinegar. Blend it all up, and it makes the most delicious homemade mayo. And then for the actual burger sauce, I just add a little bit of pickle juice, a little bit of ketchup, and a little bit of mustard. I also just eyeball this, mix it all up. It's so good. And then for the burger bowls, we just do rice, the potatoes, the beef, top it with pickles and cheese and the burger sauce, and that's it. They are so, so yummy. We always love this meal. I like to put sauerkraut on mine as well. It's just an extra veggie, and then obviously probiotics. They are so, so good. We love our burger bowls. Another one of my kids' favorite meals, oddly enough, is quiche. And this is one of those meals that I whip up when maybe I don't really have something planned or I don't have any meat defrosted. We always have a ton of eggs, especially now in the summertime. We have a boatload of chicken, so we always have a boatload of eggs. And this is one of those meals that I feel it's kind of okay, we don't really know what we're making for dinner, let's just make scrambled eggs kind of deal, but it's just a little bit elevated, it's a little more tasty, and my kids love it. I think it's just the buttery crust. I mean, who doesn't love a buttery crust? And I would consider this a lazy quiche crust. It's very, very easy. No rolling out, no chilling or any of that. It's I just do a cup and a half of einkorn all-purpose flour. You can also use regular all-purpose flour. I do a teaspoon of salt, 6 tablespoons of melted butter, and then 5 to 6 tablespoons of cold water, just enough until it comes together and kind of forms this ball. And then with my hands, I literally just press it out into the pie pan. It is very, very quick to come together, and it's just, I don't know, it's just it's a lot easier, I think, than making a traditional pie crust where you need to whip out your food processor, and it's just a whole thing. So I'll just pop it in the oven to par bake it. I bake it at 375 or 350, for about 10 minutes. And while it's baking, I get everything else going. So I usually like to add sausage. We not too long ago got a whole pig from a local farm, so we have a lot of pork. So I've just been finding meals where I can add pork into it, and we love sausage, plus it really bumps up the protein. So I cooked up some sausage, and then you just make the actual egg mixture. So I do, for one quiche, I do 6 eggs. I do 1 cup of milk, and then I add in salt and pepper, and then whatever herbs you have. Fresh parsley would be awesome, or even dried parsley, whatever. We'll just kind of add more flavor to it. And then you just basically whip it all up, and this is what you add. So once the quiche crust is actually done, I basically just layer everything on. So I'll layer on the sausage, I'll layer on the cheese, and then I top it with the egg mixture, and usually top it with a little bit more cheese. And then you just bake it for, I do 375. In my oven, it takes about 30 minutes, and that's perfect. My oven runs a little hot. All previous homes and ranges I had, it usually was more 40 minutes. So you can kind of play around with it basically, and just till it's nice and puffy and gets a little bit golden brown on the top. That is when you know it's done. But this is just another one of those meals where You just kind of throw it all together, you get it in the oven, you can clean up the kitchen while it's baking, which is so nice. And then once it's ready, you just sit down, you eat. The cleanup is easy, and it really provides a lot of nutrients from the einkorn, from the eggs, from the sausage, even from the butter and the spinach, the cheese, everything. It's really nutrient dense, but it's so good. And again, my kids love eating this. We love eating it, and it's a good, super satisfying, nourishing meal when I'm just not really in the mood to cook or I didn't have anything planned for that day. Another one of our favorites are homemade chicken tenders, and I know that my family loves this meal. I do feel like these are a labor of love. They probably are not that much work. Like, they're probably not any more work than most other the meals I make, but for whatever reason, I remember I went on strike for making these while I was pretty pregnant, because I was just like, I just don't have it. I don't have it in me. But man, we do love them, and they're so good. So first I always serve them with potatoes, like basically oven roasted potatoes, get them nice and crispy, kind of like fries. I always do the same: avocado oil, salt, pepper, garlic powder, roast at 400. And then I wanted to make the breadcrumbs. So if you make your own bread, you're going to end up with a lot of stale bread, because it just goes bad faster or gets stale faster than store-bought bread. So I always have odd bits and ends of bread left over, and I'm always finding ways to use them. Breadcrumbs for chicken tenders or meatballs, or chopping them up and making croutons. Those are some of my favorite ways, but this is definitely one way we love to use them up. So I just throw them in a blender just to basically make them into breadcrumbs, super easy. And then I always use chicken breasts to make the tenders. You can buy them already cut up, but I never do. I just cut them myself. And so to actually bread them, first I'll put a couple eggs, a little bit of milk, some salt and pepper in a bowl, and just kind of scramble that up. And then you're also going to need some flour. I'm using einkorn flour, but you can use any kind of flour. And then obviously you'll need your breadcrumbs too. And you basically just set up a little station for yourself. So you've got your flour, you've got your egg mixture, you've got your breadcrumbs, and then you just bread them. So I will take the chicken tender, I will douse it in the flour, put it in the egg mixture and get that all over it, and then just roll it in the breadcrumbs. And then I pop them onto a baking sheet with some parchment paper. I've also done this where I make them on the skillet. I'll put a bunch of avocado oil in there and kind of lightly pan fry them. They turn out the same pretty much either way, and I feel like this is less work because you just pop them in the oven. And I basically just repeat that step. It is kind of therapeutic once you get to this point, especially if it's like quiet and I can listen to a podcast or Spotify, some music. It's actually really lovely once you get to this point. So anyway, you put them all on the baking sheet, and then I bake them at 400 for about 15 minutes or so. You should probably flip them halfway through. I usually don't, and it's usually fine. But then we will just eat these with the roasted potatoes, with some ketchup, and they are so good. They obviously require more work than making just frozen nuggets you would buy from the store, but you can control the ingredients and they're really tasty. And then with this meal, I actually made some coleslaw, which is another one of those surprising things I've learned that my kids actually will eat and like, I think, again, because it's like coated in mayo and they love mayo. So I just buy the slaw mix already cut up from the store. I add homemade mayo, a little bit of apple cider vinegar, a little bit of salt and pepper, a little bit of sugar. I just eyeball it and then just kind of taste it. And it's so good and it's so easy. And we had this on the side with our crispy potatoes and chicken tenders, and it's seriously so, so good. And again, my family loves it. And then for this last meal, it was pizza night in our house, but I realized that I had a leftover like stray green pepper in my fridge. I always have onion, and then of course we have a lot of sausage and other pork stuffed in our deep freezer right now. So I thought I would make a sausage, pepper, and onion pizza, which happens to be my husband's favorite. Typically when we make pizza, it's just like cheese and sauce because it's just easy and my kids like it, and it's just one of those things that you just don't really step outside of that zone when you're just in the zone of making it the same way. but it was so good. So I just sauteed up the peppers and the onions. I cooked up all the sausage. And for the actual pizza crust, on this day, I didn't have any pizza crust started. But I learned a few years ago from Lisa, Farmhouse on Boone. If you guys don't follow her, or if you're not subscribed to her channel, you are absolutely missing out, because I have learned so many little tidbits from her over the years. And one of the things I've learned is that you can make a pizza crust with just sourdough starter. And she's got a blog post on exactly how to make it, but you basically just use a ton of starter. You cook it in a hot skillet, and it makes like a thin-ish crust pizza. It is not as good as regular pizza dough that you make ahead of time, especially like a sourdough pizza dough that you make early in the morning or like the night before, and then, you know, it's not as good as that. But it is pretty good for when you are in a pinch. It's a little bit on like the gummy side, but again, it's still pretty good, and we all eat it and we have no problem eating it. And it's a great option when you just need something quick and easy. So you just dump all of again, I'll put the exact blog post down below on how to make it, but you like I said, you just cook it in a skillet, and it's pretty easy. And you like bake it in the oven, and then you add the toppings, and then you bake it again. And again, it's pretty easy, and it's pretty quick to come together, and it's good when you're in a pinch. And so I made the sausage and pepper pizza, but then I also made one with just sauce, and we had a ball of mozzarella in the fridge. I have basil growing outside. I didn't do hardly any gardening this summer. I usually have a big vegetable garden, and I grow a ton of herbs. And this was just felt like a crazy year. Davey was born in right around the time I would be like starting seeds, and we moved into this fixer-upper. We've been doing so many projects, and I haven't even touched the outside of the house. The outside of the house actually has so much more work to do than the inside, and there was a lot of work to do on the inside of the house. And I just did not have it in me this summer. It's also to start up a garden, like to build the garden beds with cedar wood and all the dirt and the compost to fill it. It's not a cheap endeavor, so we just decided to skip it this year. But I do have one little small pot of like a couple basil plants and a couple parsley plants and a rosemary plant growing, and that's literally all I have. So I have been using that up as much as I can, because it's the only homegrown thing I've got going this year. And even though we were really busy, and I didn't really miss the garden, in that I honestly would have felt overwhelmed by it this year, just with Davey being a baby and just like the newborn phase and all that. It would have been more overwhelming than enjoyable, just with the season that I'm in right now. But I do miss it. I miss going out to the garden and picking stuff and having that fresh food, and just the satisfaction of knowing that you grew it. I do miss that. But I will definitely get back to it next year, and I'm looking forward to it. And it will be great, but it just didn't happen this year, but that's okay. But at least I have these delicious pizzas. They did turn out pretty good, and they were a nice, easy dinner. And again, nourishing, because it's made with all real food ingredients, some sourdough, some protein from the sausage, and we've got veggies. So good. But I hope that you guys enjoyed watching this video. If you are new to my channel, I would love for you to subscribe. I share lots of I'm all about nutrition as a registered dietitian, so lots of home cooking, things around the home, organization, ways to make it all happen. I share a lot of that here on my channel, and I welcome you to stick around. But I'll see you guys in the next one.